June 6, 1944, D-Day has begun. Tens of thousands of Allied soldiers rush up the Norman beaches to free the fallen fields of France from the tyrannical Nazi government. Through exceptional political and military leadership coupled with the world's greatest soldiers, this invasion proved to be a decisive turning point in World War II. Except that isn't true. By now, the Red Army was storming the Eastern Front. Rome had just been captured on the Italian front, and Nazi leadership was crumbling under its own radical ideology. The time to open a second front had long passed, and everyone knew it. Yet the Western politicians still forced it to happen. D-Day is not how we remember it. I think it's pretty safe to say that the claim I'm making is highly controversial. However, it's just as, if not safer, to say that the Eastern Front saw the vast majority of fighting in the European theatre of World War II. And the numbers don't lie. The Red Army was massive. I mean, millions of soldiers remained fighting despite Russia's heavy losses earlier in the war, already surmounting the Germans by over 2 times during the Battle of Kursk. Also, the longer the war went on, the stronger and more numerous the Soviet army had become. In Stalingrad, it was 78 divisions. In Kursk, it was 110. By the time Russia had won the war, they had amassed a total of 500 divisions. That is roughly 7.5 million men. There is simply no way the Germans could have ever kept up with these swarms of soldiers the USSR kept pushing onto the front line. More Russian divisions were in the battle for the Dnieper than there were both German and Allied divisions in North Africa, Italy, and France combined. Okay, but what about production? Surely Nazi engineers had the clear upper hand when it came to defeating the archaic Soviet regime. While it may seem true that Germany was more industrially advanced than the Soviet Union, historical records paint a drastically different picture. As early as the middle of 1942, Soviet tank production outnumbered Germans by 5 to 1. And unlike German industry, which was slowly being destroyed by Allied bombing runs on factories, the capabilities of Russian production continued to increase, much like their soldier count. Crucial battles and clever military tactics wouldn't decide the victor, but which side had the bigger numbers. This was a war of attrition. By the beginning of 1944, the Russians simply had to keep whittling the German numbers down and the war would soon be over. But of course, those measly 39 German divisions in France surely would have halted the lightning advance by the Soviets. Give me a break. Near the end of 1943, the Tehran Conference rolled around, which was a meeting between the 3 major powers' leaders. In attendance were Joseph Stalin, Winston Churchill, and Franklin D. Roosevelt. The talks were mainly based around Stalin's wishes, because everyone knew it was Russia who had won the war. When Stalin returned from the conference, he said to Marshal Zhukov, "Roosevelt has given his word that large-scale action will be mounted in France in 1944. I believe he will keep his word. But even if he doesn't, we have enough of our own forces to complete the rout of Nazi Germany." Now, I don't know about you, but it seems to me that Stalin was pretty confident in victory. I mean, after all, the liberators of Auschwitz and other concentration camps weren't Western, they were Eastern. The captors of Berlin weren't French, English, or American, they were Russian. The forces that bared the brunt of the war for years on end with no hope in sight weren't landing in Normandy. They were marching for hundreds upon hundreds of kilometers to stop the regime that nearly destroyed their civilization only a few years prior. A 1945 survey of the French population asking who made the largest contribution to the war demonstrates the full effect Russia's victories had on Europe as a whole. 57% of citizens placed the Soviet Union as the true Nazi conqueror. Yet 70 years later, this line of thinking has completely shifted in favor of the United States. Despite the USA being the ones who captured France, the population still knew the true victor of the bloodiest war in history. It is without a doubt that the war would have been won without D-Day, and that Soviet forces were the ones that caused this victory, not the relative spec of Western fighters in France. But if the politicians of the Allied nations knew this, why did they risk the invasion of Normandy with so many of their own citizens? This will be the subject of part 2, and the answer may surprise you.
This is the end, beautiful friend. This is the end, my